Hi there, and welcome back to the all-inclusive deadlift series, part 3. The deadlift is one of the most sophisticated movements you could do at the gym. So naturally, there would be many ways you can complete it incorrectly. In this episode, I'm going to cover some of the most common errors done while deadlifting, and I'm going to give you some coaching cues and tips that will help you fix these problems. Now keep in mind that I'm assuming that you already have all of the prerequisites to deadlift that I talked about in episode 1. Because a coaching cue and a tip can only go so far. It can't help you if you have a movement restriction and a movement limitation. It can help you if you already have all the prerequisites, but you have a hard time putting it together. So with no further ado, let's get to the most common errors people commit while deadlifting. Hips rising. This means that your hips will start moving before the rest of your torso and the bar. This is a very common occurrence, especially as the weight starts feeling heavy, and it is an indication of your torso's inability to transfer all the force your hips are producing in a timely manner. In other words, it takes your torso musculature longer than your hip muscles to produce adequate tension. Another cause may be that your torso muscles have a hard time transferring the force from your initial setup position and prefer another position with higher hips. Your hips elevating before your shoulders or the bar are a classic sign of a loss of force through your torso. Your legs and hips will be producing force that your torso is supposed to transmit to the bar, but instead some of it is being lost through your hips and through your torso, and it's not making its way to the bar. If all of the force your hips and your legs will be producing will be transferred to the bar, your hips, shoulders, and the bar will all be moving at the same time. Something I use that fixes this problem a lot is to think that you have a plate on your back and you're trying to dump it off your back. A lot of times people associate the deadlift with being a leg movement and they forget about their torso. If you imagine like you have a plate on your back and you're trying to dump it off your back, that may help transfer the force from your hips through your torso to the bar, like this. Try it out, give it a shot, see if it helps you. If you don't want to think about the plate, you can also think about just pushing your back into the ceiling. Or imagine like someone has their hand on your back and you're trying to push their hand away from you. These things also work as well. Again, it's just a matter of what works for you. Back rounding on the way up. This can be caused by your inability to keep your back flat because of control issues and simply because you can't tell the difference between a flat and round back without a visual. If your back gets progressively rounder during the lift, it's another sign of a loss of force through the torso, which may make you want to consider lightening the weight. This can also be caused by a loss of grip. Back rounding on the way down. This usually happens because of an excessive arch at the top, which would require a lot of flexibility to maintain on the way down. The result is that your back will progressively get rounder on the way down to agree with your flexibility. Keep in mind that if you let the bar down quickly without any resistance, it's totally fine to round your back as long as you don't have any pre-existing back injuries. As stated earlier, some of the most common reasons why your back will round during a deadlift is one, either because you're losing force through your torso and you're losing tension so your back can't maintain the same position, or because when you got to the top you were overarching, and because it's impossible to maintain this exaggerated arch on the way down as well, your back will start rounding. The common denominator between these two is that the space between your hip bone and your lower rib will start changing throughout the lift. It will get bigger and smaller. Therefore, The cue I use to fix this one is to imagine like a truck is about to come hit you and you're bracing for dear life. You're squeezing as hard as you can. And what you want to focus on is to make sure that the space between your lower rib and your hip bone remains constant the entire time. If this space remains constant, you know that your back position will not change. So if it's all loosey-goosey, it will look like this. And if I take a big breath, brace, squeeze, and make sure this position does not change, the position will be a lot more constant and you won't see the same alterations in movement in the torso. Give it a shot, try it out, see if it helps for you. Some people don't like to imagine like a truck's about to hit them, so imagine like a boxer's about to punch you. Whatever the case is, finding a coaching cue that works for you is all about something that you can relate to. So a life experience or something that has happened to you that you can relate to. So whatever it is, try to find something you can relate to that will make you make sure that the space between your ribs and your hips does not change and that there's constant tension throughout that entire time so that you can't allow that position to change. Shrugging and bent arms. Instinctively shrugging at the top of every deadlift and or bending your elbows during the lift is a sign that you're trying to produce lifting force from your upper body and arms. This is an inefficient way to deadlift and can hinder your progress. Both shrugging and bending your arms usually comes from the same problem. People are used to lifting things with their hands and with their shoulders that when they come to the gym and they're told to deadlift for the first time, they're not used to letting your arms rest and letting your hips and torso do all the work. So it's very natural for people to try to bend their elbows, flex their elbows, use their biceps, and then shrug the weight up and try to use your traps as well. Therefore, a cue that I found very, very helpful when it comes to keeping your arms long and keeping your shoulders down to make sure that your hips and legs are producing the force and your torso is transmitting the force and your arms and shoulders aren't moving themselves is to imagine like the bar is a piece of stinky garbage. So you want to keep it as far away from your nose as possible, right? If you bring it closer, it's going to smell worse. You keep it far away from you so your arms are always as long as you can. If that doesn't work for you, I don't know if you have ever dealt with electricity before, but sometimes if you deal with electricity and you don't turn off the fuse, you want to keep it as far away as possible because you're scared you're going to get shocked. So whatever works for you to keep your hands away from you, to keep your arms long, to keep your shoulders away from you, this will work to help keep your shoulders down and to help keep your elbows straight throughout the entire lift. Something that also helps specifically for the shrugging is imagine like someone's tickling your armpit, so you want to squeeze your armpits as hard as you can. If you are going to squeeze your armpits, it's naturally going to be very hard for you to shrug and squeeze your armpits at the same time. So very quickly a deadlift can go from something like this to something like this. Again, if these specific cues don't work for you, take the idea, take the principle, and make your own cues with the idea that I'm trying to give to you. Every one of you watching this video may have their own thing that they would like to keep away from their face or that would help them keep their arms long. Maybe you can think of having a cast all through your arm that will help keep your arms long. It's up to you. Take something that's close to your heart, take a past life experience. These cues work the best as long as they have the same idea and they produce the same end movement.